And with that, I will pass it over to Joshua Barnes, the founder of Process Mentors.
Thanks, Ron, and thanks for everyone joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Bill Brantley as well as Tara Mohn. And their topic for today is elevating the DA toolkit with knowledge and culture. So with that, Bill, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the topic.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much. So great to see everyone today. And one of the things, and I got to say, just right out the start here, I'm a recent convert to Discipline Agile. I was telling Josh this earlier. I learned about this a little bit, I think in December of last year when PMI had acquired Discipline Agile. So I looked it up, thought this makes a lot of great sense. And I was so impressed by it. I actually went out and got the CDAP. And one of the things I noticed with Discipline Agile as I was looking through it, and I know there's a lot of changes going on with PMI, I felt like there was something missing. And that's when I talked to Tara, who's a good friend of mine, and she's also president of the knowledge management community of DC. And I said, I want you to look at this great framework, because she's also a PMP. And I said, what do you think? And do you feel like something's missing? And she said, well, of course, knowledge management, because that's what she's all about. And Tara said, yeah, knowledge management should be a part of this. And where is it in here? And I said, well, let's talk about looking how we could fit it in. And let's talk about how we can, advocate putting knowledge management in. So in our talk today, I want to give you the bottom line up front. We're going to tell you why you need knowledge management in Discipline Agile. And then we're going to make the argument that it's basically Discipline Agile has to be baked into every process. Okay. And we'll kind of explore that a little bit later. But I'm going to let Tara here give you, since she's the knowledge management guru, some background about knowledge management.
Thanks, Bill. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to share our idea about how we can fortify our disciplined, agile mindset by incorporating knowledge management. As Bill mentioned, knowledge management is my thing. I love it, and I see how it can benefit every system I look at. So this is what we want to talk about. Now, many of you may not know specifically what knowledge management is. However, it is definitely the secret sauce. It is the addition of knowledge management processes end up ensuring more efficient processes, increased productivity, and also gaining the competitive edge. And it's a framework of things like making sure people are aware of your knowledge assets and able to find them. That's a thing. If you have an out-of-control shared drive, as many people do, having that mindset, where is this going to be put? Where are people going to find it again? Also, finding the right knowledge and making sure it gets to the right person at the right time. That's what knowledge management is all about, all of those processes. Do you ever notice how when you have a good system, like naming conventions on your shared drive and organization built in there, things are much smoother? If you do not have that mindset at all, it ends up creating a big mess with all of the things we create, constantly creating content and documents and valuable things, this critical knowledge, and not finding it again. It's ridiculous. How frustrating. When KM is a recognized business component in your process, the problems tend to fade away. And our idea is that knowledge management should be baked in. That's the code for the slide.
I'm pulling it up.
Okay. All of those things I mentioned about being aware, finding things easier, organizing, and getting things to the right people at the right time, all of those components need to be part of your mindset. And with disciplined agile, the blades themselves, you can bake these things into those processes. And so this is, if you can't get the message, you have an image here to show you how we can, like with our blades, which is a great concept. And if we can think about putting these kinds of processes like the onboarding, offboarding, before people leave, capture their knowledge. A lot of times people just walk out the door. So our idea is that knowledge management processes, or just that mindset, where is our stuff? When we're doing this blade, we're doing the finance, doing the HR, do people know where their knowledge assets are? Are they going to spend a lot of time looking around? So it's that mindset of starting off, making sure people have what they need to be successful. They know where stuff is. And before they go, they are communicating those essential, critical things. So our idea is that we build it, bake it into the blades themselves, the process blades.
So Tara, we've got our first, I'm going to interrupt you just with a question. So we have a question that Marcus is asking, and he's saying, is this something that you would put in a particular blade, or is it just something we would have in options in some of the decision points of the goals? And Marcus, good question. Apparently you've got some awareness of how Discipline Agile is laid out. So what do you think about that?
Actually, this is something that Bill was going to be talking about, because when we first we started talking, and he was showing me the blades, and I'm like, oh, this is great. You know, I love that visual. And he said, we're both like, I don't think it's a separate blade on its own. It's more of a force field, building that efficiency, effectiveness force field that exists in all blades. It just ends up being kind of like Bill he can probably say it a little bit better, but I think of it, it's like a little package or a little container that surrounds everything. So when you move through the blades in your process that you've arranged the correct way for your goals, that whole blade is going to be couched in the people, where is the critical stuff? How can I get to it? Is it organized? Am I finding things? Because the better you do the KM part, the more you're fortifying those processes, the blades. And that's the idea, the baking it in to the recipe.
Josh,
Bill, you might want to say something else.
I'll real quickly follow up. I mean, you got it right there. It's just, when we were first talking about this, we couldn't figure out what blade to put, what blade to make it of, or where to fit it with the blades. And I realized, just coming to Discipline Agile, it's kind of like going to someone's house when they're having a party and say, hey, you know, you need to repaint the walls, and you need to move this around. So I thought it was a little presumptuous to kind of, hey, let's suggest a whole new blade. But when we looked at it, I kept thinking, and that's when Tara came on the gravitational field theory. It's kind of like how planets and comets and such are enmeshed in the gravitational field, and they're affected by it, but they also affect the field. And that's how we're seeing the knowledge management piece. And we were also going to talk about organizational culture, but we wanted to leave that off for another time, because there's some deeper ideas we want to work with that. But we're keeping it with knowledge management, and we just see it as a field that surrounds all the blades, because every blade has some type of knowledge management. You can stick them right into the process goals quite easily, and it has a way of, each one needs the information from each other, but they have a different way of handling it. Okay.
So would you see then that this also might be related to any type of tool guidance or type of tool where, you know, if a organization and teams are using an application lifecycle management tool where, you know, they can use tags, and there's lots of ways that we could handle being able to find information quickly and be more efficient with it. Is that something else that you've considered?
Let me take this one, Tara? You want it?
I could take it, because I've been in organizations where people think SharePoint is knowledge management. Oh, yeah, we have SharePoint, we have knowledge management. And no, you don't. It's much more than a tool.
Yeah.
So the beautiful thing about the Disciplined Agile and the blades is it lets you determine what tool you're going to use for what process. And what is being used. You know, sometimes you don't need a new tool. That ends up creating more problems. Sometimes you can just look at what you have and say, for this, we're going to use SharePoint, or for this, we're just going to use some daily Scrum update meetings, and and that's what's beautiful about the disciplined Agile mindset, because it's like, what did you say, Bill? The Legos concept?
Yeah, the Lego concept. Yeah, I love the whole way of working and how to
Yes.
build your way of working.
Right.
Mhm.
And so that's my thing about tools, because people will always be looking, oh, there's a tool that can do this. Yeah, that's true. But you have to keep in mind, what will my users adopt? You can have the best tool in the world. If people don't use them, it's wasted,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I work at the USPTO, and I know there's plenty of SharePoint sites that are just sitting there gathering dust, and they're knowledge repositories, but no one ever visits them. It's like ghost towns.
Yeah, and they get pretty unwieldy. I mean, you can get just lost in lots of that type of information. But I have another question I'd like to ask you, and this is something that I know as we were discussing this topic, which is a tie into something I'm interested in. And I gave a previous webinar discussion on using Discipline Agile for non-software development related work. And so you were mentioning how if we got a question from somebody, and I haven't checked the Q&A lately to see if we had one, as far as, have you tried to be using some of this in practice? And Bill, you were able to answer that. So do you want to share a little bit on practical application?
Yeah, I was approached by our Office of Communication at USPTO, and their thing is that they do communication events, press releases, conferences, all this kind of stuff, academic outreach. And they have projects, and they're trying to get into Agile projects. So they're not really developing any software, they're developing communication events. And the thing with them is they have to rapidly turn around, and maybe in a day with a project. So they were trying to find the fastest Agile project management methods out there. That's why they called me and say, what's the fastest one out there? Like, okay. And that's when I was recently come on Discipline and Agile. So I went and actually trained them on very simple, fundamental ways of working and how that would work for them. And we're going to try a test pilot. And for Black History Month next February, we're going to use Discipline Agile to plan the entire month's communication events. And we're going to sit down and have a process workshop, do the ways of working on this, and just kind of stretch it there. So I'm excited about that, because that is about as far as you can get. And I used to be an IT project manager. That's about as far as you can get from software development, communication. But I'd love to see how this works. But I like the way people, again, I kept using the Lego analogy. The communication folks really took to that. And they love the idea of building their own way of working once I started showing them the process goes and how that works. And you can be sure knowledge management is going to be baked into this one.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So we have a few more questions. So William asks, is this addition to the base DA something that you've tried in practice, and how have you updated the DA content you're using?
Well, you want to take that, Tara? Or you want me to take that?
You can take that, because I
Okay.
haven't.
So, I mean, again, I'm a recent convert to DA, and I keep calling convert, but I'm recent to DA, but I've been in Scrum for a long time. I've been in Agile for a long time. And actually, Tara and I have been working on incorporating knowledge management into the Scrum process. So we see this as a logical extension of that. And we've actually given talks. I forgot the exact conference we did, the big talk, but we talked about in the Scrum lifecycle, all the knowledge management points that you need to capture. So like when you're doing your product, your backlog, when you're doing your sprint daily stand-ups, the retrospectives and such, and how to capture that in the tools, but also the methods and the mindset. So that's why when we saw the Discipline Agile, we thought, well, this is a combination of a lot of methods and takes the best of the methods. I thought, well, we need to put the knowledge management piece in there. So we're seeing, and I've been looking at the life cycles now, Tara and I have been taking a deep dive into it and seeing how in the life cycles, where we can put in knowledge management and bake it in there. So like you take your continuous delivery for Agile, where would we put the knowledge management pieces? And where would the knowledge be kicked off, and how can we reuse that? So it's still an early work.
Yeah. And for those of you that are on today or possibly watching this afterwards, all of the great content that's in Discipline Agile is always evolving, right? I mean, we've seen just a really good evolution this year already that sort of refreshed what we used to call the square onion, and now it's more of a rectangular onion, and some of the additional things that have been added in. And one of the things that I regularly do with organizations is we do a little bit of initial tailoring, because there are always some of those options that might not be applicable to an organization, and we might not want to have that for teams to possibly look or choose if it just absolutely would be something that wouldn't work. But and obviously we do that pretty sparingly. But in addition to that, if there is something that is important for an organization or important for a particular value stream or product area, or just team, we do put things in, right? We do have additional options we might put at a decision point, or we might have additional decision points that we might put in for some of the process goals. So that's something else just to keep in mind for those of you that are new to DA, is that it has a wealth of information that's in it already, and there's obviously a lot of content in there, but there are ways to add things in, whether we're doing it very sparingly or not. Another question we've got from Marcus is, do you have any articles or white papers on this already, and or will you be publishing any specific to DA?
We're working on them now. We don't have anything yet. We've kind of got some rough outlines, but we are going to be publishing soon. Yeah. And we're going to be presenting at this. I mean, give a little plug. I'm going to be talking to Drupal GovCon tomorrow about why you need Discipline Agile for federal programs and projects. And I know Tara's been talking about it too. And we have a great meeting tomorrow with the knowledge management community of DC on storytelling. And I know that doesn't sound like Discipline Agile, but there's an idea about knowledge management and using that in your Discipline Agile. Yeah. So, Tara and I, we're just so excited about this. We're going to be producing a lot of stuff, but that's why when I saw your invitation, hey, let's jump on this, Tara, and go.
That's right. That's right.
So Bill, are you ready? I mean, we don't normally pull up a lot of slides and do a lot of screen sharing, but I am going to pull up the other slide that you wanted, because I do have a question for you on this, and I also want to make sure I give you an opportunity to just touch on this. Let me share my screen again here, and let me get this up. So you are using the latest version of the broad picture of DA here, and you've got the squiggly lines that are coming out of the oven, right? That's baking all these things together, sort of all throughout this. And one of the things that I wanted to ask is, we've got things that are down at the team level. So we look at Discipline Agile delivery, which is now in the discipline DevOps space, and that's all about the teams delivering. But where, as we get into these other layers, do you see that there might be a bit of a focus you would want to bring, or you'd want to recommend to organizations that they look to, whether it's finance, or it's people management or vendor management? Because we know documentation is obviously very important when we're doing software development. But as we're supporting the delivery teams that are doing software, as well as these other areas that we want to take an agile way of working as well, they do have more non-software things, right? So documents and lots of other types of files.
Well, I can kind of reach back to my IT project management days, and I love DevOps, and I can tell you how much of an impact my finance office had on my DevOps, on being able to secure and procure things for me, and even people management. I mean, I'm a trainer, and the reason I got into training, I always call myself an accidental trainer, is because I was running teams. We were doing such cutting edge technology. We didn't have people that could train us in it. So I had to go and learn it. And I was essentially one book chapter ahead of my team in some of these topics and training them on that. So that's why that's another reason what I like about the DA is, context matters, and the whole enterprise view of that. Because I'll be honest, I work in the federal government. Tara works in the federal government. We silo ourselves so fast. And I'll give you the horror story about office personnel management. I used to work. We had every unit, and we were talking about shadow IT. And if you got a credit card, you can have an IT application. We had 23 knowledge management applications. No one was talking to each other, and they went out and got their own. And we didn't put together, how this information would flow. And of course, none of the knowledge management systems talked to each other, which was hilarious. But when you look at the Discipline Agile, that's why I love this chart here. And that's why we said we didn't want to make it another blade, knowledge management, but have it in the blades, because let's take security. What does security have to do with transformation? Well, I can tell you right now, we're trying to transform at USPTO, and a large part is the security considerations, because we're sitting on what we call the $1 trillion database. I mean, you get someone that hacks into the patents and trademarks database, you got a unique competitive advantage.
Yep.
So whatever I'm doing in DevOps with the security, I got to make sure my transformation, if we're doing any kind of changes, we're coinciding. So we have to be careful with that. So there's a lot of stuff here that doesn't look like it's going to fit together, but it does. You know, research and development, yeah, that always affects us in IT operations, affects us in our teams. And that's why you see those little squiggly lines that Tara put in there. The knowledge is going to flow between them, and it'll be transformed by them. And like DevOps, let's take something very fundamental, retrospectives. We do a project, we have an Agile project, we have the retrospectives, we see what we did well. That's going to go up to people management, where I might start training on that. It's going to go up to asset management. Maybe we needed a better tool, or maybe we needed better ways of getting people together. So that's why we look at that force field. That's why we couldn't turn into a blade. We could just see every one of these being embedded in that force field of knowledge management and being affected by it.
And we've got a question from Barbie asking, where in the organization is the best place for knowledge management to sit?
Tara?
It's a great question. I love that question. I would say at the top, right? Like the C-suite and the CIO, like on top, like with the CIO at the table, because a lot of times it ends up being under IT, and that goes to that idea like, oh yeah, knowledge management, I'll get a tool and then I'll have it. And it's more than that. But it also needs to be able to waft down throughout the organization. And because again, it's a mindset. It's like when you're creating stuff, you got to be thinking, okay, how are people going to get to this? And how, if it's critical, it's very important. So you need to have the leadership driving the preservation and distribution. So I think it needs to be at the top, at the table with the all the other leaders. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right.
I've been saying that for a long time.
And Tara knows my argument, because I like to grab a little bit from my training department, because one of your killer apps in knowledge management is not really a software tool, it's your communities of practice. Like we're doing now, getting communities of practice, getting practitioners together to talk. So in my training department, I actually help launch communities of practice, project managers, product owners, all of those, to help them and help foster those networks so people are talking.
So another question from Raul is, can you give your elevator speech to sell this idea to a leadership team member? I guess, and I would pile on top of that and say, yeah, what would be the statement that could be said that would provide the biggest possible impact as far as enticing somebody to say, yeah, maybe we should be looking at this?
So you want to take that, Tara, or you want to go for it?
I can take it a little bit because my elevator speech about knowledge management talks about how knowledge management helps me combat infobesity. Isn't that a great word?
It is.
And that actually gets people's attention, just the word itself. It's a real word. They didn't make it up. But it's actually creating so much information that the human brain can't absorb what it needs to, because there's so many things out there. And knowledge management helps combat that result, where people are just overloaded with all too much information and they can't deal with it, so they're not getting to the critical stuff and making the right decision. So I would, what I would do is I would definitely use that word to get attention, because it is attention grabbing, but also it's true. And they have a lot of studies where they see this effect. There's a point where the brain just quits. You know, the human brain doesn't get bigger with our knowledge stores that we're creating. You know, storage is cheap, so people just have tons of it. But if you don't have the capacity to filter and absorb and discern, then it becomes noise. And that's where knowledge management can basically be helping, because it's always there, kind of the force field. It's making sure things are talking to each other and connecting across the blades. So anyway, that's my elevator speech.
And that word in itself, info obesity, is a really good one to just probably perk somebody's ears a bit, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a great word.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if I were to give the elevator speech for why knowledge management in DA, again, every blade is affected by knowledge, and it needs knowledge, and it also sends it along the stream there. So it's like a blood flow. Now that we're mixing our metaphors here, but it's like blood flowing between the blades, and I have a gross metaphor, but the blade needs knowledge, and they use knowledge, and they give it to the other blades. So that's the reason, you know, and I mean, just go for a whole day without sharing any information with anybody. Try it at work, see what happens.
Well, fantastic. We are just about out of time, and so I do want to thank you, Tara and Bill, for joining us today, sharing your thoughts. We will also put a blog together, answer some of the questions, and maybe a little bit more detail that came up. And I do have a few other just brief announcements. Again, come to the Process Mentors website if you've got any questions. And what we're going to be doing next week is our Ask Me Anything session. So Tara and Bill will be coming back along with Garrick and DDA that were guest speakers earlier this month. And in those sessions, again, everybody in attendance drives where things go, what types of questions you have, and what type of guidance there might be available for us to provide to you. Something else that was quite interesting this week that PMI announced with respect to DA is there are some new certifications in what they're calling their Agile certification journey. So they're aligning the certifications a little bit closer with what we see in the industry. And I would like to just pull up, we've got our DA-LSM, our existing workshops that we're conducting, but we are at the end of October putting out on Eventbrite today new workshops that are specifically for the Discipline Agile Scrum Master certification. Mm-hmm. And on that, what I did want to also be able to announce is in October, we're really fortunate that we're going to have Mark Lines, Scott Ambler, and Al Shalloway join us on the 7th, 14th, and 21st, and then all together. And Mark's actually coming to speak on the new certification journey. So that's something that is quite exciting indeed. So thanks again to Bill and Tara. Thanks again for everybody who joined us today. And for anything else, please just drop us a line and we'll get back to you. Hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.